We are going to give a little lecture on the secrets of prosperity. There is a place in the Bible that clearly states that the apostle wished that mankind's health would prosper and that they would prosper even as their soul prospered. Most people are not aware of the fact that much of the Greek mythology was ascended master inspired. A lot of it was. The story of Proserpina is rather interesting too. The earth goddess, the earth mother. Whether or not it's mythological or not is not so important as some of the ideas embodied in it. What I want to convey to you is that prosperity is abundance. And the Lord Christ, when he was upon the planet teaching in Judea, he said, I am come that ye might have life, and that more abundantly. Somehow or other, people have a habit of misconstruing the Master's intent without really meaning to do it, and thus cutting themselves off from and denying the intention of the deity. Now, obviously, none of us could subscribe to a share the wealth plan, where we'd all pool our money on the planet into one pot and all wind up with 98 cents. But this is about what it would amount to. If you're going to use the dollar standard, the money standard, when you put all the money into a pot and divide it with all the people on earth and give them their portion, in a matter of probably 7 years, you would have all the money, just about all of it, back where it started from. And this is true. Because the divine distribution of wealth that occurs on this planet occurs according to karmic patterns and karmic law. And every person that has money, in most cases, is entitled, according to their karma, to have it, even if they didn't earn it in one lifetime and it came to them through inheritance or as a windfall, or they won the Irish sweepstakes. The money comes to them because there is something in their causal body up here that attracts wealth to their being. But the possession of money itself does not make a person either better or worse. Not at all. Money is responsibility, the same as every talent and gift of God. And when you have a great deal of money, or even a little money, it is a form of prosperity that cannot be dammed up like the Red Sea. The Dead Sea, I mean, not the Red Sea, the Dead Sea. Well, the River Jordan flows, and it flows down toward the Dead Sea, and when it comes into the Dead Sea, it empties into it, but there is absolutely no outlet in the Dead Sea. And this has been used a lot in Sunday school to illustrate certain spiritual laws. Wherever you have anything that continually takes in and never gives out, it's a symbol of death or stagnation, because there is no flow and there is no movement. Harvey, in his explanation of the laws of the flow of blood, he showed the blood cycle as going through the whole body and coming back and returning for oxygenation in the lungs. I mean, we all know that's basic physiology. But the moment, and here's something that's almost frightening, the moment you dam up an artery, you really have trouble. Now, you may wonder why I'm bringing this up. Quite a few ladies and men, too, have had varicose veins. Doctors have an operation that they can perform for varicose veins where they tie off certain of these vessels and just stop the flow of blood. Well, one woman had this done to her. And this is in a book written by a doctor who exposes some of the things that are malpractices in hospitals and in the medical profession. When he tied this off, A few days later, she noticed that her toes began to become very painful and inflamed, and then she noticed it was turning dark and discolored, and then her whole foot turned discolored. Well, she went back to the doctor too late, and she lost her foot completely. It turned gangrenous. And this was caused because there was no flow of blood into the foot. I think very few people realize how beautiful nature works to keep our blood flowing through our system. Well, prosperity is just as natural to the children of God as the flow of blood. But one of the secrets of prosperity of the masters is involved in the fact that they always let go and never dam up the flow of their energy. Businessmen do this same thing in a way by investing and reinvesting their capital. Perhaps a little more than 10%. Now, 10% is a tithe. And when Elizabeth was taking the dictation from the goddess Fortuna today, I got a revelation that I never knew before. The revelation concerned the word tithe. I didn't hear it as tithe. I heard it as tithe thee. And that the 10% is the portion of the divine talent that becomes a seed to tie you unto your presence, unto God, the great source, so that the next cycle of the decimal system will grow. In other words, it's the zero, you see. You come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then you tie thee to the presence, you see. Fortuna made me hear that. Tie thee. And it means a tie, a link, a union with your source, the source of your supply. And by giving that tenth, you're planting the seed that makes it grow into the next cycle. And if you deny it to God, you actually don't gain at all. By holding it back, you lose, because you don't have any seed to make it grow in the next cycle. And that is why Mr. R.G. Letourneau, did you ever hear of him? Construction machinery man. Well, he made a compact with God to give away 10% of all that he had when he was a very young man in that field. And this man has a huge family, and he travels all over the United States working for God. He pays far more attention to God's business than he does to his machinery business. But the machinery business is so big today that it's just a tremendous industry. But he has always used this secret of prosperity, of giving away the seed tithing, see? And as a result, he's just multiplied and multiplied and multiplied because the law has continued to work for him. So I consider one of the secrets of prosperity is giving 10% of yourself to God. There is no law on giving more. But I think to give less is to deplete the seed. Several years ago, a man lived by the name of Lloyd Douglas, I think it was Lloyd Douglas, who wrote Magnificent Obsession. In Magnificent Obsession, he revealed one of the great secrets of the masters, and that had to do with keeping your mouth shut about what you do. This is why some of the people come up to me and whisper in my ear and they say, "Oh, give so much money to the university." You know, they don't want anybody else to hear it except themselves, because they know that that way what they give is going to return to them and will also be multiplied, you see. One of the problems, I think, in the modern church has been the tendency to use the names of donors on some of their literature. In New York City, there's a tremendous activity of this kind, that they make everybody that gives a sponsor. And then they publish the name of all these people on the list. I think that, as Jesus said, verily they have their reward. There is a place in the Bible where the secret is given. He said, when you give, he said, don't sound a trumpet before yourselves as the hypocrites do. But he said, give in the quietness of your own closet. And this referred to the prayers that they would make. Now, some people have very little money. But one thing that I believe in as a secret of prosperity is the giving of thy very little bit that thou hast, in other words. Some people say, well, I hate to offer the Summit Lighthouse 98 cents They say, well, it's too belittling to me. But Mr. Rockefeller gave people a dime, didn't he? That's all he gave away was 10 cents to everybody. He was always handing out 10 cents. That was his charitable contributions, 10 cents. So don't feel that as far as God is concerned, He knows exactly what you have. We don't have to know. It isn't necessary. No one has to know. But you look at the thing from the standpoint of it is more blessed to give than it is to receive, and you will receive. This is the secret of prosperity, is giving. And the people who dam up the flow by saying, oh, I'm afraid, they generate fear within their world, and the fear is the type of thing that was brought out in the parable of the unjust steward who received one lousy talent. And he hid it in a napkin, and he buried it in the earth, and when the Lord came, the man that got 10 talents, he said, how did you do? He said, I got 10 more talents with the 10 you gave me. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful in a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. And he went on down the list. And then he came to the poor little guy that had the 1 talent. The 1 lousy talent. He pulled that out of the ground, took it out of the old moldy handkerchief, and he said, here is exactly what you gave to me. I was afraid, my Lord, at this awesome responsibility that thou hadst given me 1 talent, and I took that which thou hadst given me, and I hid it in the earth. The Lord looked at him rather quizzically, sternly, and he said, thou wicked and unprofitable servant, he says, take that talent from that man, and give it to the one that hath 10 talents. For to every one that hath shall more be given, and to him that hath not shall be taken away that which he hath. Now this has been much maligned and much misunderstood. This is in connection with the use of the gift. Do you see what I mean? This has been quoted as saying that God said that everybody that doesn't have is going to have less, and everybody that has is going to have more. That wasn't what was brought out at all. What was brought out was that the man who had the 1 talent and didn't use it was the one that had it taken away from him. So don't ever let anybody fool you on the Scriptures on that regard, because the secret of prosperity involved in this is clearly indicated in the use of that which thou hast. Do you see the point? It's a lot different than people say it. Half the people who preach don't even know what they're preaching about. Over half, but I'm trying to be generous with them. And it is true, and you know it's true. So, it is in the use of our gifts that God has given to us that we multiply them. And it does not have to involve money. Money is merely a medium of exchange. It can involve service. It can involve things you do for others. It can involve other people out of your family as well as your immediate family. I think one of the secrets of prosperity that I have noted that breaks the crystallization in your world, that keeps you from getting supply, is the feeling of ownership of people. A lot of people feel that their son, or their wife, or their mother, or their father, or their brother, or their sister, in other words, family, is all important. But supposing these children that they have, or these parents, had been other people than the ones they are. You could have a different mother. You could have a different wife or different children. They'd still be yours. You don't own the people, and they don't own you. All people are free. And this sense of family circle exclusively, ruling out everybody else in the world, is one of the reasons for crystallizing the consciousness and stopping prosperity from coming in. When you start to think of the world as your family, that doesn't mean you have to give every beggar that comes along $1. But when you start feeling and thinking in terms of loving other people outside the family and doing something for someone at least outside the family, and not necessarily someone you love, but someone that may be even impersonal to you, you begin to think in terms of God, because God has to take His energy and assistance and render it to people that hate Him, that spit upon Him. Did you know there are people that curse God in this planet and mean it? There are people, I have heard people damn God and shake their fist in His face and dare the lightning to strike them. You ever heard this? Most of you have. Yes.
And it did.
Oh, it did?
Yes.
In Canada?
Yes. My father told me the story. There were three chaps standing in a barn door. And this one guy was damning God in a thunderstorm, just as we say. And it did strike the barn and killed him, and the two men standing with him were knocked to the knees, I guess, but weren't killed.
Well, that was quite an illuminating experience, wasn't it?
Quite a shocking experience.
Quite shocking. Well, I'm sure that there must be times when this works that way. But sometimes they get away with it for the moment. For the moment, they get away with it. But God turns around in most cases, though, and still pumps the breath into these people and the life energy into them and still takes care of them. Because He's an impersonal God as well as a personal God, as we learn through the Keepers of the Flame. Therefore, I think one of the greatest secrets of prosperity is the ability to detach oneself from the person and to be impersonal. Because all these things are magnets that make you God-like. And I am come, that ye might have life, and that more abundantly, is the secret of it all. It doesn't say, you have come, that you might have life, and that more abundantly. It says, I am come, that ye might have life, and that more abundantly, which denotes that it is the source of the presence that holds the source of your supply. It doesn't come from outer sources. I can tell you a real funny story about the summit. It isn't so funny, but it happens to be a truth. When we were in Washington, D.C. in our early days, and our budget was lower by far than it is today, I would sometimes wait 3 or 4 days to go down to the post office and pick up the mail. And we'd get a goodly stack that way, and it would seem like we were getting more money in, and it was good for my morale. If I went down there and found 4 or 5 envelopes, it was kind of depressing when you had a lot of bills to pay. So I'd wait and I'd bring home a big stack. Well, over a period of several months one time, I kept track. And if that mail was that high, or it was half that high, or it was only 4 letters, it never seemed to vary more than $10 for the same amount of money. Now you figure that one out. It didn't matter. I've gone down there and I'd get 3 or 4 envelopes after 3 or 4 days. And I'd open those 4 envelopes, and there'd be a $100 bill in one, and maybe a $50 in another, and a check for $75 in another, and things like that, you see. Those 4 envelopes would have as much money in as, and then again I'd go down and I'd get a great big stack of mail, something like that, you know, and I'd come home with it bound up, and I'd say, gee, we really got a lot today. And there'd be just almost all the way through, $1 in one, 50 cents in another, a couple of quarters, and $1 in another, and a check for $1.75. One woman sent in a check for 75 cents. And it went on like that all the way through. So I've noticed that the Lord takes care of you regardless of the source. We had this in our own experience. And we have found out that supply continually comes in. But we noticed something else. We noticed that Fortuna, the goddess of supply, seemed to possess the power to release more money to us when we really needed it. So every time, I'm going to tell you one of our secrets now, every single time when we get into trouble here and have a contract to meet and we don't seem to feel we have the money to meet it, we get up on this platform and the whole staff goes to work. For to the goddess of supply of all God's wealth from realms on high, release thy treasures from the sun, and now bestow on every one whose heart beats one with God's own light the power to draw from heaven's height abundance to expand the plan the masters hold for every man. Attune our consciousness with thee, expand our vision now to see that opulence is meant for all who look to God and make the call. We now demand, we do command abundant manna from God's hand, that now below as is above all mankind shall express God's love. We go into that in a work session. We sometimes use it for 10, 15, 20 minutes or a half hour. And invariably, within a few days, the mail will bring in the required amount. Now this means we don't look to people. We've quit looking to people for our supply. We look altogether to God, and we have found that this is the secret, another secret of supply. Don't depend on any human being. Depend on God. One thing that I'd like to point out to you is that Elizabeth had a great deal more of prosperity consciousness than I did. I was raised the son of a farmer. And I have nothing. He was a rancher too. I mean, he came from a Canadian ranch, in fact, and a fairly goodly ranch, which was his own. He sold it to his father for $1 when he went to the States with the idea that he would receive it back when his father died. But the other brother, the younger brother, stayed at home and worked the ranch and wormed his way like Jacob and Esau into his father's heart, so his father left it to the younger brother, and my father was defrauded of it. So my father had to work primarily. He didn't have too many skills. He was not too well educated. And he had to work very hard for his money. He could have done very well on the ranch. It was a big ranch. In Canada, he could have done well, but in the States, he had a pretty tough time of it. When I was 9 years old, he passed away. My mother was not strong, and she was very upset and nervous, with one child alone to support of 9 years old. So many times I didn't have anything in the house except maybe 2 or 3 slices of bread to eat. So when I went into the Army, the United States Air Force, in World War II, my mother was a widow living alone in a small home, and she had very little to do with. And we made an Army allotment check to her of about $25, and she was able to earn about $25 a month, and between that she had $50 a month to live on, which wasn't much to pay taxes on a house and keep a house up and try to feed yourself and have bus fare and a few other things. It was pretty rough. So when I come out of the Army, I had nothing. And Elizabeth was a little different than that. She didn't have anything either. But at the age of 9 years, she became a Christian Scientist. And she had the orientation around Christian Science and their concepts of prosperity. I was trained more along the Methodist church lines. In fact, I was a member of the same church as the former Senator Alexander Wiley. Senator Wiley was one of the very wealthy people in my hometown. And we had a lot of wealthy people there that were Methodists. And we had a few of us poor people that were Methodists. And we all sat alongside of each other in church, but that was about the extent of it. So there was a great deal of difference in my consciousness. And when I started out in this work, I was a little fearful. I was a little afraid. I know what it means to have fear of wondering where your next meal is coming from or your next dollar is coming from. Elizabeth didn't have any of this. She was trained practically from a child to think in terms of God. So I received a great deal of my education on cosmic prosperity from Elizabeth. And she trained me to think, and she used to say to me, well, now God wants us to have that, so we're going and put a down payment on it. I'd say to her, well, we haven't got enough money to pay for it. What's the matter with you? We can't do that. She'd say, God can supply all of our needs. Now we're just going to put a down payment on it. And if we can't pay for it, we'll just forget about it. Well, that woman, since I've known her, has changed my whole thinking. I wouldn't be at all surprised if she went over to London and saw London Bridge and decided to buy it, that she wouldn't come up with the money. She'd put a down payment on it, probably wind up owning it. I'm sure she'd convince the British Crown to give up London Bridge. And then it would be falling down to supply the Summit Lighthouse with material or something. So I want you all to know that what I have learned of prosperity, a great deal of it has come through the masters working with Elizabeth on the prosperity angle. Now, I'm sure you realize that I had something to give her in return. And I did. Because there were other things that were given to me. I was one of those that are called, blessed are the poor in spirit. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven, see. But the two of us together have been able to find out a great deal of the secrets of prosperity. Because what prosperity we have is given to the summit. And this is good. Some of you people don't realize that when we started this activity, I wore suits from the Heck Company, by Heck, in Washington, D.C., and these suits with 2 pair of pants cost $19. And I remember standing on the stage in this home that was absolutely grand, and standing there on the stage with these baggy pants worth $19 and giving a dictation from the great ascended master's realm. And so for almost a year, I wore that kind of equipment. But then the time came when the masters explained to me the laws of prosperity, and I started using them. And the first thing you know, I began sprouting tailor-made suits. Well, this is a lot better from the master's standpoint. So we have come the hard way through this bit on prosperity, and we know that these laws work for everybody. There isn't anybody that has to be without anything, and there's no need in having more than you need, really. Some people say, well, I'm going to put away for a rainy day. I think it's a good idea to be prudent. Master Moria taught me several years ago. The time I was in rather straitened circumstances, I once paid a bill that I owed, and when I wound up paying that bill, I had $6 left in my pocket and a mountain of debts, and I was driving a brand new Lincoln. I didn't have the money to even telegraph to a friend of mine who was a millionaire and who would have loaned me some money. And if I did not have a credit card on gasoline, I wouldn't have been able to got to his house and told him my circumstances. So Master Maury come along and he said, now enough of this foolishness. I said, what do you mean? He said, enough of this foolishness. He said, what you have got to do is remember that no matter how poor you are, always keep $100 somewhere that you can lay back on. You don't have to keep a lot, but he said always keep at least $100 tucked away in cash somewhere. So when Tom Miller came here to work, and we didn't have too much to give him when he first started, I said, Tom, you've got to keep $100 somewhere. So Tom went out and he bought some traveler's checks, which I told him to do, and put them in his pocket. Now, I think this is good advice to anyone. I'm going to tell you why. I know that very few of you are what you'd call poor. But it doesn't matter. Some of you have more than others. But it's a mighty good idea to always have on your person or somewhere concealed at least $100 in either cash or traveler's checks. Master showed me that this is seed for prosperity. And when you're down to your last penny, and it's a terrible feeling, when you're down to your last penny, you don't have anything at all to fall back on except maybe your friends. You go to your friends and sure as shooting, they'll tell you that they couldn't possibly help you because all kinds of things have happened. All their money is in bonds. And they're time bombs. I mean bonds. You see what I mean? So keep seed of prosperity and keep your thoughts very, very much in an uplifted state. Now this is hard to do. And if it wasn't hard to do when you're down and out, more people would do it, you see. But if you will learn not to let go of every cent that you have if you're in trouble sometime, but to hang on to enough to tide you over, you will have a confidence in that seed. And then you can make your application to God and He will provide you with the wisdom to know how to use what you have and to get more. But if you use everything down till you're broke and bent and twisted and turned, then your confidence is often shaken. Although I think that the Lord put me through this one time in order to teach me the law so I would be able to experience these things and know how to advise other people. Because we have all kinds of people in this activity that come to us. We have every kind of class of people, from paupers to millionaires, from farmers to industrialists. And we have among our members some very, very splendid people all over the country. Sometimes the man with $1 million may ask your advice just as much as the man with nothing. And we want to be able to advise people properly and correctly. Your thoughts have a great deal to do with your prosperity. And sometimes the way to break a pattern is to spend money. I have seen times when everything was going badly, and I went out and bought an expensive suit right in the midst of the worst downdraft. And I got such a lift from wearing that suit that my whole mind went up. And the first thing you know, the money was flowing in again. It's the old pump priming situation. You have to release something from yourself because you're suffering from mental stagnation. And that's the whole secret of prosperity. The secret of it is really covered in water. Now, here's your water, and this is the water level right here. Water will come down through here, it'll fill up these, it'll go down here, it'll fill up here. But where will it come up if the flow is not dammed? Will it not come up to the same level in this over here? Isn't that a sound engineering principle? Water will always seek its level. But dam this up, right in here. Stop the flow. Even if you've got water in the pipe here, if you stop the pressure from up here that's coming down, are you going to have the water rising up over here? No. That is basic to the law. Water will seek its level, and it's the level of consciousness. The reason prosperity doesn't flow into people's worlds is because they have stopped giving. And it doesn't matter how much water is in here. You must understand this here. You can have so little water it's but a trickle. You can get that water to flow into this if there's nothing in here to impede its flow. That's why pump priming is valuable. That's why a woman can go out and buy a new dress. She can get herself an expensive jewel sometimes. And the lift from that and the release of the money will start the water to coming again. And that's the whole thing. You have to understand how to manipulate this. You not only manipulate it by prayer and by right thinking, but by seeing that the law of stagnation does not function in your world to dam it up. This is why some of the great multimillionaires of all time have taken such tremendous risks. And sometimes they have come out right on top. It's not a matter of luck, it's a matter of using the law. Of course, whenever I give a talk like this, I'm always concerned that people understand that prosperity is more an activity of the spirit than it is of the flesh. A lot of us like to think that prosperity is something that's of the flesh, that we do something and we win something and we use the laws and then we get released into our world a great deal of money. And money is what people always seem to want. But it's really not true. It's happiness and contentment and peace of mind and understanding and compassion and tolerance and every good quality of life that is worth more than anything else, and yet money cannot buy that. But you can't very well live in the modern world without money, unless you're a peace pilgrim or somebody like that. You can do it by using the begging bowl. They do it in India. They run around with a begging bowl, and All day long they beg until somebody has pity on them and drops a coin in their cup and they go out and buy their meal. I don't think most of us could live that way, particularly if we have families. I know the Summit couldn't live that way because of the fact that we have a printing press to maintain. Sometimes we spend $100 in one day just paying a mechanic to come in and work on that press. We have people to feed. We can't expect that the city of Colorado Springs is going to feed us. We've spent a lot of money in this city, $100,000 probably this year in this city. It's a lot of money. And our people have spent a lot of money that live here. We've benefited this city and this state. And I think it's interesting how God has provided for our needs. And I think that you, every one of you, should develop faith that God will take care of your needs no matter what they are. I think it's a terrible sin for anybody in this audience or anybody in the world to be worrying about their future, because the one way of damming up the supply of goods into your world is to worry. Worry will very definitely cut you off. The minute you start worrying about it, you tune in with millions of other people who are worrying. And without knowing it, their thoughts will come into your world in the subconscious, attracted like a magnet. And the first thing you know, you'll be going down, 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 all because of their thoughts. Among the greatest secrets of prosperity, then, of all, is to tune in with right thinking by thinking right yourself. Turn your thoughts to God and the Masters and to an inexhaustible sense of supply. Learn to develop the feeling that no matter what I need, it will be supplied to me. I've had a lot of people laugh at me because I said to the man whom we bought our last house from that down below the hill there was a pad, and I said, that's our landing port for our helicopter. Well, the helicopter is worth $50,000, as you probably know. And I had the idea that God would provide me with a helicopter, and I'd be taught how to fly it, and that I'd be able to fly around the United States and give lectures with a helicopter. Well, we don't have it yet. But the house was a lot more money than a helicopter, I'll tell you that. And the Lord provided the house. And we still think when we get this ranch out there, and we get the university out there, that we'll have a helicopter to fly over here to the Springs to this area here. And maybe to travel all around the country, and I don't know. Elizabeth says she wouldn't fly with me. Of course, I think that, you see, her consciousness of prosperity is very great, but she doesn't seem to have faith in my perspicacity.
That's a good word.
I mean in flying a helicopter. Anyway, that's the way it is. In this year of our Lord, 1966, on October the 16th, at 20 minutes to 4 in the afternoon,